going to be talking about rosin. Rosin is made from pine tree resin. Resin is like sap, but whereas sap from maple trees is turned into delicious syrup, you shouldn't eat rosin. It's only slightly poisonous, you wouldn't die, but you could get an upset stomach. Anyways, we use rosin because without it, a bow doesn't make any sound. This is a brand new bow which has not been rosined yet. The horsehair is too smooth to grasp the string by itself, but it does have little microscopic barbs coming off of it. Rosin will stick to these barbs, and then as you pull the bow along the string, the rosin tries to stick to the string too, which makes the string vibrate and produces a sound. To apply rosin, you rub it onto the bow hair. If it's a new bow, you'll need to put a lot of rosin on it. Some people like to use longer strokes, but on a new rosin, I find it difficult to keep the bow on the rosin cake. As I do the long stroke, I slip off, then I get rosin all over my fingers instead of on the bow. And then I have to rosin again because now I've taken the bow off, I've taken the rosin off of the bow hair. So instead, I like to use these short motions back and forth. If you rosin often, you only need a little bit. For example, here is my bow. It hasn't been that long since it's been rosined, so I'll only give it one pass back and forth. And voila. Most teachers will tell you to rosin every day, but I think that's just because we assume that students will forget sometimes. Realistically, you'll probably only need to rosin maybe once a week. Professional musicians who play for hours every day do rosin every day, but that's because they play so much that the rosins come off their bow. If you play violin, viola, or cello, you don't have to worry about applying too much rosin. If you have too much, then when you play it'll just fly off in a little cloud and you'll have the perfect amount. The exception is basses. Since you guys have a stickier rosin, it is possible to put too much on. And if you do, you'll find that you get a grating, harsh sound. If this happens, just wipe some of the extra rosin off with a rosin cloth, and you'll be good to go. So how do you know if you have enough rosin? Well, you haven't learned how to hold your bow yet, but I'll tell you anyway. You have enough rosin when you can pull it across the string, and the bow will make a full sound without having to push down at all. Do you remember from the white belt unit that we wanted all the muscles in our body to be as relaxed as possible? The same is true for our bow hand. And anyways, if the sound is hollow, wispy, or ghost-like, then you probably need more rosin. Although, if you have one of those cheaper instruments, like one of the toy violins you can buy on eBay, then it might not have a full sound no matter how much rosin you use. So what actually happens when you apply rosin? Well, rosin is a semi-solid. If you know the four states of matter, they're solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. One way to change between states is to apply heat. So if you take some solid water, we call that ice, and you melt it, it turns into a liquid. If you heat it up some more and boil it, it turns into a vapor. And if you were to heat it up even more, it would turn into plasma, which is what the sun is made out of. Anyways, semi-solids are a special kind of matter that have some of the properties of both solids and liquids. They mostly hold their shape, but if you put rosin on its end for long enough, like a couple years, you'll notice that it starts to get a little thicker at the bottom. Other examples of semi-solids are like syrup, which is closer to a liquid, so I mean I would kind of call it a semi-liquid, but it means the same thing. You'll notice that syrup, when you pour it out, it doesn't go sploosh, it goes gloop. Another semi-solid is glass, which is made from melted sand. When you apply rosin, you're heating it up so that it becomes closer to a liquid. It's basically like melting the top layer off of the rosin. It then attaches more easily to the hair barbs. Have you ever rubbed your hands together in winter to generate heat? The rosin works the same way. And just like your hands, you have to push them together and move fast enough to generate enough heat. If you're too slow, or if you go fast but your hands are barely touching, then you won't have enough friction. When rosining, if you don't move fast enough or push hard enough, then the rosin won't apply. This doesn't mean you have to push really hard. We don't want to break anything. You just need to push down a little bit. So rosin comes in light or dark varieties, and actually it comes in all sorts of colors, from pale yellow to amber, red, green, very dark brown, and there are many brands, but I recommend just getting whatever is cheapest. If you're renting your instrument from the store, it probably came with a $3 or $5 rosin. You could get an expensive rosin, but to be honest, the actual difference in how the bow feels is very slight, and I don't think you'll be able to tell any difference at all until you've played for several years and start learning really advanced bow movements. If you do get to choose what type of rosin you get though, in addition to being the cheapest, I prefer dark rosin. The darker the better. I've had a couple students whose pale yellow rosin melted too much and then ruined their bow hair when they tried to apply it. I suspect what really happened is that they probably left their case somewhere where it got hot and then they rosined while it was kind of gloopy. But since I've only seen it happen with light rosin, I'm a little paranoid of the light rosin. Oh, bass players, you guys are kind of the exception to this. I would not get the cheapest rosin at the store for a bass. The regular rosin that other instruments use just isn't sticky enough to grab your strings well because, well, the bass strings are the thickest of all of them. If you try to use the regular rosin, you'll have to push down really hard to make a sound, and even then it won't be beautiful or controlled. There are several brands of extra goopy rosin for basses, but I have tried out about a dozen, and I've only found one brand that I like, which is called Pops. It usually costs $10 to $15 for a cake, but that's the life of a bass player. When you take it out, it comes in this kind of paper covering, just to protect it, keep it from glooping out and getting stuck to the case. But in order to actually use it, you have to peel the top layer off, which is why this one's a little more of a mess. Okay. Because rosin is a semi-solid, you don't want to leave it in the car or in front of a heater or a sunny window. It'll melt and get all over the place. Bass rosin especially melts very easy. Even at room temperature, it will slowly gloop out, which is why it comes in these plastic cases. It only takes maybe 10 minutes in a car to melt. I've used this to my advantage sometimes. When I dropped my bass rosin once and cracked it, I just put it back in the tub, left it in the car for a couple hours, and it melted all the way back into the shape. The top was even shiny as if it were a brand new rosin, just shorter than when it was new. I wouldn't try this with other rosin though, because there's no plastic container. It'd probably make a mess. I've seen some YouTube videos of people melting their rosin back together, and the fumes that came off of it made me think it seemed kind of deathly. I wouldn't want to breathe that. And violins, violas, cellos, the rosin for those is just $3 anyways. But to show you guys an example, this rosin cake has been traveling with me in between schools, and it's heated up in the car. You'll notice that the rosin is melted and reformed on the other side in the bottom of the paper container. Here's another tip. Don't scratch the rosin's surface. This is a myth that's pervasive in town. Even some folks at the music store have been known to tell people to take something and scrape the top of their rosin. Don't do that. If you scratch it, it won't apply as evenly, and you might get little chunks that break off and stick into your bow hair, and then that'll produce an ugly sound or damage your string. The origin of the myth is that when you get a brand new rosin cake, it has a shiny hard coating on top. This is just a hardened layer of rosin made by melting and cooling it. When I took my bass rosin out of the car that time, it had a shiny new layer on top just like it was new. Anyways, this layer of rosin is a little bit harder than normal rosin, and so you have to work your way through it before the rosin will go on your bow normally. But we get through this layer of rosin by simply rosining. Just the normal back and forth will take that layer off, and it takes maybe a minute, so don't be lazy and try to get through that. Just take the minute to go through it. You may notice that the shiny layer stays in some spots for longer. This is normal because new rosin isn't perfectly flat, and so the hair takes rosin from the edges until it all gets to about the same height and a little curved. So you'll notice that the edges get a little dull before the middle does, and that's fine, don't worry about it. Rosin's just fine, even if there are some shiny spots on top. Another tip is don't leave your rosin lying around the house. If an animal or younger sibling eats it, then they might get sick. If someone knocks it off a table or steps on it, it will shatter, and you'll need to clean it up really fast before it goops up into the floor. One last thing is allergies. It's uncommon. I don't think I've ever had such a student, but some people are allergic to the rosin dust. It is made from trees. For those folks, they do make synthetic rosin. Synthetic means that it's fake, it's not real tree sap. They make that for people with allergies. It is a little more expensive, probably about as much as a base rosin. So possible symptoms, in case you're playing and you wonder, if your eyes get irritated, if they bother you, but only when you play, and every time when you play, then you could be a little allergic to rosin. But Colorado has a dry climate, and there are many other things around here that can cause eye irritation, so it could also be from anything else. If you get that eye irritation and you also get a rash on your arms, or your chin, or your neck after playing, then it probably is a rosin allergy. Because when you play, you emit tiny clouds of rosin dust, and as they go through the air and settle on your skin, if you get a rash from that, then I would recommend trying the synthetic rosin. Okay, so you're almost ready to start actually using the bow. One more instructional video to go on how to take care of your bow and keep it in good shape, and then we'll learn the bow hold.